We're joined right now by Jean Marrow, who is a research assistant with domestic policy studies for the Heritage Foundation. And Jean, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for having me on.
Yeah, the timing is good because I think Sean Spicer is going to discuss this Aetna situation today in his news conference as part of their further evidence of the fact that Obamacare is sort of imploding.
Well, yeah, like you said, Aetna's withdrawal from the exchanges highlights Obamacare's inherent problems. The company recently decided that it's going to withdraw from all of Obamacare's health insurance exchanges in 2018. Obamacare was nothing but a financial disaster for Aetna, which is one of our nation's largest insurance companies. Between 2014 and 2016, the insurance companies sustained $700 million in losses, and they were estimated to lose another $200 million in 2017 alone. But Aetna is not alone, and it joins a long line of insurance companies that have pulled out of the ACA exchange markets, and it really just goes to show that the regulatory infrastructure of Obamacare is not working, it can't work, and this legislation needs to be repealed and replaced.
Yeah, if we can explain for people for a minute, I got into a little bit in social media with a friend who posted this Aetna story and then said, I hope somebody can explain to me without using GOP or Dem talking points why this happened. And my point to him was because Obamacare only works if you don't. And unless you have the mandate and everybody is participating, these healthcare companies can't afford to provide the level of coverage they're required to provide by the government now without raising premiums so high nobody could afford it. And that's my explanation for it. How would you state that for us, Jean?
The Affordable Care Act highly anticipated that people between the ages of 18 and 34 would buy plans on the exchanges. And if they didn't, they banked on what's called the individual mandate to encourage people to buy coverage. However, what happened was the mandate didn't work. People decided that the penalty, which is about $695 for the individual, is actually much cheaper than Obamacare insurance costs. For instance, in 2015, 6.5 million Americans actually paid the penalty, or about 13 million got exemptions from the penalty. So that's about 19 million people who have said, hey, I'm not buying coverage. I'd rather either pay the penalty or get an exemption from it. And what ended up happening is we had a disproportionately number of more older and sicker people who bought coverage on the exchanges. So what you have is more sicker people being insured, which costs the insurance companies more money. You have less people who are healthier not buying to help balance out, essentially, the costs and the money coming into these insurance companies. And so, Obamacare started out in 2013 with about 395 insurers selling plans in the individual markets throughout the U.S. And as of 2017, we're down to 218 insurers, which represents about a drop of about 45%. So, it's been cost-averse for the insurance companies and also for the consumer. There's a huge lack in choice for what people can buy on the exchanges. For instance, we had research out in the fall that shows that about 70% of counties across the United States only had one or two options on the exchanges. So, all around, Obamacare has been a big failure.
Yeah, and for those people who were on it, they were subsidized, so the premium increases didn't impact them as much, which gets us back to the whole mandate nightmare and the fact that this thing couldn't have existed without that mandate. So Aetna's still in the marketplace. It's just not in these Obamacare exchanges. So people who have Aetna, not to scare anybody, people who have Aetna through work or whatever the case may be, still have Aetna insurance.
Yeah, Aetna mainly covers about 60% of who they cover is large employers. And they also cover Medicaid Advantage customers as well. So people shouldn't be worried that Aetna is going to go completely under. It just means that they have completely pulled out of 2018 Obamacare exchanges.
I guess there's no chance they're going to get back in it at this point because it's so up in the air, correct?
Well, Last week the U.S. House passed the American Health Care Act, which is a step forward in comprehensive health care reform. So it's very possible that in the future, Aetna will expand that coverage to people. That bill, again, represents a positive step forward, and now it's up to the Senate to pick up the bill. It does need to be improved in various areas, but it does, it should signal to the American people and to insurance companies that progress is happening, and that we want to expand coverage to all people, and we want individuals to be back in the driver's seat of their health insurance and not government bureaucrats.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'm talking to Jean Marrow from the Heritage Foundation. Jean, I do this job day in and day out, and I hear people call in here, and I'm surprised sometimes at the number of people who are concerned about this American Health Care Act. I had a lady call in the other day who said, but what's going to happen to me? I'm 62 years old. I'm not going to get Medicare till I'm 65. What am I going to do for the next 3 years if Obamacare is not an option? I'm like, well, where do you get your health insurance now? She said, through my husband. I'm like, that's not going to change. There's so many people out there who misunderstand the narrow slice of Americans who were targeted by Obamacare.
Right. So Obamacare, it has insured about 18 million more Americans, and about 12 million of those are on Medicaid. The others are on the exchanges. But what we need to keep in mind throughout this whole process of comprehensive reform is the 25 million Americans who have been adversely impacted by rising premiums and shocking deductibles. So as we're going forward with reform, the goal is to provide access to all people, regardless of where you get your coverage, and to also keep in mind the 25 million people who desperately need relief from the Affordable Care Act, which has really been unaffordable, unworkable, and just simply unfair.
Yeah, I know that Heritage doesn't get involved in politics, but that they look at policy. But is Heritage in favor of this American Health Care Act, or do they have some issues with it?
We find this bill to be a step forward, and it's up to the Senate now to do its job, but it does need to improve the bill. One of the crucial areas that needs to be reformed, and really it's the linchpin, if you will, of health care reform, and that's to reform the federal tax treatment of health insurance. So in the current House bill, it continues what's called the Cadillac tax, which is a punitive tax on high-value group plans. And it's about 45% excise tax, essentially, on those plans over a certain amount. So essentially, it's continuing that over. And what the Senate needs to do is to put a simple cap on the tax exclusion for group insurance. So this, so no one's confused, this would not force employers to alter their plans, but it's merely going to limit the amount of health benefits that are tax-free, just as current law, limits other pre-tax employment compensation.
Yeah.
Economists across the political spectrum know that this is something that needs to be done because it's going to really help drive down healthcare costs throughout the entire healthcare system.
It's a great point.
So that's one crucial element.
Jean,
the Senate needs to really take into consideration and reform.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Jean Marrow with the Heritage Foundation, and you write for the Daily Signal as well, is that correct?
I do write for the Daily Signal, and I assist our healthcare team with putting out our great papers, and I would highly recommend for those who'd like to learn more to go to heritage.org. Again, that's heritage.org to learn more about what needs to be done in comprehensive healthcare reform.
Sounds good. Jean Marrow, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, appreciate that. Yep, you too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut her off. I'm coming up on a hard break.